Oh, my mom was always doing a project of some sort, whether it was a craft project or a school project or something. She was always busy. She didn't just sit still. If she was watching TV, she was also knitting or quilting. If she was knitting or quilting, she was also talking to a neighbor. She always had something that she was doing. Well, she went to college to be a teacher, and she wanted to be a home ec teacher, which she did for several years until, well, I think until she had 2 children. And when she had 2 children and not just one, because she supported my dad while he finished seminary, and so she was working during that time. But then when my sister was born, I think she became a stay-at-home mom, but then she taught sewing lessons at the local craft stores and fabric stores and such. So she was always doing something with sewing or cooking, even when she wasn't teaching in the public school. Then when I was in about 5th grade, she had taken several years prior to that and gotten her master's degree and gone back to teaching as an elementary school teacher, but she was still doing the sewing and crafting stuff on the side. But I would say that her biggest goal was probably to do mission work through the church. And she had done one or two summer mission programs when she was in college that really impacted her. She worked in Colorado and New Mexico on some of the Indian reservations, and that really had an impact on her. Then again, when she had children, that she wasn't able to do that as much. But I remember as I got older, my brother and sister and I would always spend at least 1 week, if not longer, with my grandmother in the summer, while my dad, who worked at a church, would take the teenagers on a mission trip, and my mom would always go along and help with the cooking and the mission work and such. And then when I went to college, I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my parents decided that it was time for them to pursue full-time mission work. And they actually went to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and spent a total of 13 years working there with the local Argentine mission through the Southern Baptist Convention. The first thing that comes to my mind when I think of how my mom was generous, and it might go along a little bit with being compassionate, but when I was in 1st grade, my mother's best friend died. And it just happened that my mother's best friend had a daughter who was in 2nd grade that was one of my best friends. And it was a very difficult time because a single father now, a widower with 2 small children, lots of people had to pitch in and help him, so he could still work his full-time job and take care of his 2 kids. And it was just a really difficult time. And it was also, of course, my mother's best friend that had died of cancer. So the first Christmas after my mom's friend Kay had passed away, my mom told us that we were going to have guests at Christmas dinner that were not our usual family and stuff. And it turned out she had invited this father and their 2 children to come have Christmas dinner with us and be part of a family on Christmas, so that they weren't just sitting at home by themselves remembering, we don't have our mom with us here this year. So I think that really showed my mom's generosity in the way she thought about other people and put them, first, and opened up her home to some, people that needed help or a meal or just somebody to listen to. She was generous in a lot of other ways too, though, but that's probably the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of that. When I was in elementary school, she and my dad, together with some other adults in the church, would take the youth group to New Mexico every year to the same Indian reservation where they'd established a relationship with some of the home missionaries through the Southern Baptist Convention there. And they would do maintenance on buildings in the reservation, and they would also do kind of like a vacation Bible school for the kids. And then they would also work with the parents on maybe some adult education type classes like sewing or carpentry, that sort of thing. And I think my mom really used a lot of her crafty skills and her cooking skills in providing on those trips as well. She couldn't sing worth a darn, and so she didn't ever participate in the programs and that sort of thing, but she would help behind the scenes and always be there as a helping hand to other adults that needed somebody to talk to or needed help with a project of some sort. She was just always giving of her time and her energy. So I think that would qualify as generous. My parents' whole job in Argentina was to give of themselves in different ways than you really expect missionaries to give. Their first assignment was to be the like dorm parents at a student home that was set up for the children of missionaries who lived in outlying areas in the country. They would come to Buenos Aires and go to the international school in the city so that they could get make sure they had all their high school credits and things so that they could go back to the United States for college and be well prepared. And so if their parents were living in the interior of the country or in a small town and they wanted their children to have the high school education that was available in the city, then they sent their kids to my parents and they lived in the dorm. It was really like kind of like a big multi-room house. I mean, it was huge. And my parents actually lived in the servants' quarters. And then the kids had the bedrooms and things that would have been the bedrooms if it was just a family living there. And they had a big, like huge living room and a huge kitchen dining room area. So it really worked well for having lots of different children there. And then there just came a point in time during their years there that there weren't any high schoolers to have in the student home, and it was too much upkeep to keep this huge house and no kids there. So the mission sold the house and my parents moved to an apartment and their job changed and they were doing more office work and things. And my mother took on the job of being the hostess of the mission, which meant she arranged housing, she arranged transportation to and from airports, she arranged meals if necessary. If it was an emergency situation, they also made arrangements for any emergency travel. I remember very clearly, I went to visit one time and there had just been a horrible car accident where one of the missionary men that was fairly new to the country had been hit by an Argentine driver, he and his wife, as they were traveling down the highway, and the husband was killed and the wife was horribly injured. She spent several months in the hospital recuperating, and my mother arranged for all of the transportation for this woman's family to come down and stay with her, arranged housing and arranged translators so that they could talk to the doctors. And then through all that process, they also had to arrange for the funeral of this man because he had to be buried while his wife was still in intensive care in the hospital. And I saw my mom handling all of that rather than just hearing stories about it later. And it was just really incredible to see her just, saying, what do I need to do? What do you need? How can we get this done? And taking care of all of it. And my mom actually died on the mission field. She became ill from a tropical virus that she had picked up in Costa Rica many years earlier. And it flared up in her system, and before the doctors could figure out how to treat it, she passed away from it. So my mom died doing what she loved and where she wanted to be.